This will be a smaller video. I just wanted to give you guys an update on how the Blazer is doing. Since the last video, I've put 600 miles on this thing, and of course, I've found some flaws. Some of them I noticed right away, some of them showed up over time, and some of them just showed up recently when it dropped to almost 0 degrees Fahrenheit. It's around 15 degrees out here right now, so it's kind of hard to do a lot of work, but there's a couple checks I really want to make before I drive this thing more. And don't worry, we'll be getting back to this guy pretty soon. After some mail mix-ups, I finally have, I think, the parts I need, but there's still some challenges to overcome and a lot of work to do, and it's really cold. So for the moment, we're gonna do a couple things with this truck. This truck has been pretty much my main vehicle since rebuilding that engine, so I wanna get it working the best I can. So we'll start off inside the truck. I'm not sure if I ever mentioned it in the videos, but about a year ago I actually went and bought this Fiero steering wheel because I really hated the S10 Blazer one. This is a bit smaller and just has a much better feel to it. And I think that's pretty funny. Shifter alignment still needs a little bit of work, but it's workable for right now, so I don't want to mess with it. 4-wheel drive high still works great. 4-wheel drive low still has a bit of an issue with the shifter here, and it's had this ever since the body lift, but the shifter kind of hits the body, I think, because it doesn't click into 4-wheel low really solidly. It does work and it does activate, but you kind of need to keep a hand on it. Gonna have to fix that in the future. Maybe cut a little slot in the body, or maybe try to move brackets around. I don't know yet. There are very few situations where I need 4 low, especially with all the torque this engine has and how bad the tires are. So I'm not too concerned about this right now. I still have no idea how much power this engine makes, but it'll spin a tire pretty easily at anything below maybe 20 miles an hour, but I kind of attribute that more to the bad tires and the weight distribution on this thing. Ever since I replaced the connectors, which was somewhere right before I broke the transmission, temperature gauge worked perfectly. Voltmeter works great, and the alternator is definitely up to the radiator fan demands. Gas gauge works great. Oil pressure gauge does not always work. It seems to be getting stuck or something. Maybe there's some corrosion in the gauge itself, because I've tested at the sensor and the oil pressure is still good and the sensor's reading is still good. Probably 25 psi at idle, which is still very good considering the tolerances. But this gauge, sometimes it'll work and read like 40 or 50 if I'm driving at cruise speed or on the highway or something. And then sometimes it'll get stuck down and just read like 15 to 20 psi the whole time. And if you get out, pop the hood, and pull the connector off of the sender and plug it back in, it springs the gauge back to life and it'll work correctly for a little while, usually until you shut the car off. The vents don't work great. I don't know if that's the vacuum line or if that's just being old and kind of crappy. I don't know. But the heat in here works pretty well, but since it's a 180-degree thermostat, it works pretty well like cruising around town or certainly sitting still, but on the highway it's not enough. And there's no headliner or anything, so it still gets pretty chilly in here on the highway and the heat just can't combat it. I might switch to a 195-degree thermostat. I'm not sure yet. The central locking is a little funny because it doesn't move the lever all the way. I'm not sure if it just needs to be lubricated or what. I haven't even looked at this. I'm not concerned about it. It's just a little annoyance. And the spring on this handle is also busted. It works totally fine. It just doesn't retract the way it should. Tape player doesn't work great, and that's pretty annoying, but the radio does work. Reception is not amazing, but that might be the antenna I put on it, but it's enough. Both of the seats don't seem to have any kind of lock to keep them from moving forward, which hasn't been an issue yet, but I don't love that. I'm guessing it's not supposed to be that way. If anybody knows what's broken there or how to fix it, I would appreciate if you could tell me about it. Here's the hood latch I repaired. I did this pretty much right after I got the truck. This thing ain't gonna break. Okay, where to start? The thermostat housing seems to have had a tiny little leak, so I'm kind of eating my words on that one. And I've never had one of these leak by doing that. But it's such a small leak, I'm not worried too much about it. I just tightened these bolts a bit more. I tightened them to 40 foot-pounds. If you'll remember, these are 7/16 bolts, and there's a lot of thread engagement, so I feel okay about doing that. And hopefully it stops that tiny leak. If it doesn't, I'll eventually take this off and probably double gasket it or something. I think the worst thing this leak would do is maybe take some of the paint off here, and I think we'll be okay if that happens. The tune on the carb is pretty bad, and I'm having a bit of trouble with it for a couple reasons. One of which is the temperature, so I haven't dialed in the choke or the idle mix screws quite yet. The other problem is because the throttle shaft bores are a bit loose. It's hard to get the idle set super low, because then every once in a while it'll settle at a point where the idle is too low and it'll try to stall. I haven't had that happen yet, but I have the idle a little high, I think. And I say I think because there's still no tack for me to use. So I'm not too sure about that. I'm just kind of guessing. Unfortunately, that guessing and these funny settings mean that I've been getting real bad gas mileage, like 10 or 11 miles per gallon. And remember, the transmission still doesn't have the torque converter lockup hooked up, so that doesn't help either. I mess with them a little bit, but the rods and springs are back to stock right now. And stock is usually, it's a bit on the lean side for these 1406 carburetors. So I'm just gonna leave that alone for now, and hopefully it's okay. I still hate the exhaust sound, so at some point I'm gonna try taking the tailpipes off the muffler and see if it's just getting shrill because of maybe these bends or just because of weird sizing issues or something. I like having the exhaust exiting not under the vehicle, so I'll probably just have to make some kind of tailpipe for it in the future. There's so much salt on the roads right now. I'm kind of glad I'm driving this thing because I don't have to worry about it too much. It's already pretty rusty. So that's a plus to having a rusty car. I'd still like to make an alternator bracket back here somewhere, because you still can see and feel a little bit of vibration in it at certain RPMs. I think the only thing I might do is accelerate the bearing wear. Power steering pump works great. All the problems I had with the old one, gone. And no problems with the belt system since that rebuild. I actually just noticed this just this second. The upper radiator hose is leaking a little bit here, so we'll tighten this hose clamp and hopefully that's enough to stop it. So if you remember, before the rebuild, the dipstick tube would kind of rattle out sometimes. I figured that was blow-by, and I think it partially was, but I still found this would come a little bit loose sometimes. I kind of enlarged the waves on the end here that hold it in, so now it's a really nice tight fit, and it has not come out since, and I don't think it's leaked since either. So right now I have this vacuum stuff connected here. And this is the vacuum reservoir down on this side, and then this goes into the cab and should be used to activate the vents, but that doesn't seem to work anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and, at least for now, just block this whole thing off. I've got a significant oil leak from the oil filler cap, which is interesting. I've never seen one leak this bad. There's a lot of oil coming out of it. I already ordered a new one. We'll wipe it off and install that, and hopefully that stops this problem. But I'm really glad I caught it. I just hope this is the only oil leak. Even like right after the rebuild, this side seemed a little louder and tickier than that side. Nothing major, but just a little bit. And I just want to make sure it's not this adjustment. I didn't check it after break-in, so if some lobes wore a bit or anything like that happened, I really need to know. We'll also examine all the spark plugs and see what they look like. Last time I changed the oil, which was like 80 miles after break-in or whatever, you do have to take off the Y pipe to change the oil filter. I'll figure out a relocation system at some point in the future because that is too annoying. But the last time I reconnected the Y pipe and I kind of lazily reused the gaskets and donuts even though they weren't in great condition. So there is a little bit of an exhaust leak, I think, because there's some funny sounds, and I really hope it's just that exhaust leak and not lifters or anything, but that's why we're gonna check them. Okay, I'm gonna pop off all the spark plug wires and pull the spark plugs. The spark plugs look totally fine. Since it was only run really briefly to pull it into the garage, these probably would have been washed by the really rich mixture, but there sure doesn't look like anything dramatically wrong in any of the cylinders. So just like before, I'm going to rotate the engine until the intake is closing to check the exhaust valve. Okay, the intake valve is closing. So now we can check the exhaust valve, just like we did with the engine on the stand, by moving the push rod vertically and trying to feel for any play. And there isn't any right there. So that's a good start. What I'm going to do is just back off half a turn, and we should still be at 0 lash. Yep, still 0. Go a little farther, and we've got some lash. So I'll just tighten it until that lash is gone. This is a little hard to do at this temperature because your fingers start to go numb pretty quick touching all this steel. And it's right back at 0 lash, and we'll go half a turn past that. That's the exhaust valve set. We're going to look for the exhaust valve opening. So now the exhaust valve is opening and we can check the intake. That still feels good. I'm going to take half a turn off of it. Since these two checked out, all I'm going to do is go through and feel all of them, just to double check that none of them are loose. I'm not going to redo the preload settings on any of the other ones. Okay, went through and checked them all. All the adjustments still seem good. I'll tighten these back down to 90 inch-pounds. Okay, I just topped off the oil, and here's the old oil filler cap and the new one. This piece of rubber, the seal, is completely hard. I could probably crack it with my hands. And this has a nice new one. I just put a little bit of oil on it to help it seal. And there we are. Hopefully that stops the oil problems. So the plugs look good. The lifter preload seems fine, which means the cam seems fine. I can't really find anything wrong other than these loose hoses that leaked a little bit and that oil filler cap that leaked a little bit. I think we're good. With the spark plugs put back in and the wires reattached, it's ready to get back on the road. This thing definitely still needs work, but I'm relying on it for now. Hopefully, especially with all the work we've done, it should be on the road for a good while.